Hello, Cambridge, and welcome to What's That About, where we answer all your questions of the pressing issues of the day, brought to you by CCTV, news made just for you. So pay attention, Marty Rabinowitz of 339 Glenwood Ave, Apartment 2.
Yeah, Marty, put down that vape and learn something. Our first letter comes from Clay on West Baltimore Street. Clay asks, one of the possible questions on this year's state ballot calls to reform the stipend system on Beacon Hill. But why should I care how much extra money legislators make?
Well, shit, Clay. How many times do we have to tell you that Beacon Hill is an opaque, corrupt hellhole where everything is controlled by the House Speaker and Senate President before it finally sinks in?
First, can you explain for viewers in Clay from West Baltimore who may not be as passionate about Beacon Hill transparency as you what the history is behind the stipend reform bill?
Sure can, Julie. 15 months ago, a bill was presented to the legislature proposing to rationalize stipend reform and make it less subject to the whims of the four-party leaders. As is all too typical with anything leadership doesn't like, the bill was ignored, not even sent to committee. So much for transparent democracy, huh?
As my daddy used to say, it's a doggone shame.
It sure is. So a coalition of concerned citizens, led by former legislators fed up with business as usual on Beacon Hill, began collecting signatures to get the stipend reform law on the Massachusetts state ballot for 2026. They successfully got enough to clear the first hurdle, and now stipend reform is officially up for consideration before the legislature. But in reality, the only way this passes is if it gets on the ballot and voters approve it in November.
And let's also remind viewers why stipend reform is considered so important for transparency.
Well, Julie, because the current system allows the House Speaker, Senate President, and minority leaders to dole out patronage assignments to their favored henchmen, like the leadership were ring givers from a bad Beowulf adaptation. If you're a loyal servant of Rob Mariano, you can expect to get a chair or vice chair position that earns you a significant amount over your base pay, up to 50% more. But if you have a backbone of your own and vote against the wishes of the Speaker for life, you might get bupkis, like 45 members of the 200-member House currently get.
The base pay set by statute for all state senators and representatives is currently between $104,000 and $108,000, depending on how close the district is to Boston. But stipends for committee leadership positions can add anywhere from $5,000 to $30,000 to $100,000 or more for the top leadership. Both President Spilka and Speaker Mariano earn over $200,000, close to what Nancy Pelosi did or Mike Johnson makes for leading the U.S. House of Representatives.
Shit, that's right. But not only that, 1/5 of those patronage positions are for leading committees that do not hold a single public meeting or consider a single bill. It's basically Ron Mariano and Karen Spilka doling out no-show jobs like Tony Soprano did for his buddies on the Sanitation Commission. Or in a more modern parlance for you NBA fans, what Kawhi Leonard got from Steve Ballmer for promoting an environmental company, which is about to get the Clippers fined into the next century.
Yeah, indeed. Well, just last Tuesday, the state legislature finally held a joint committee hearing on the stipend referendum bill after doing their best to ignore it for 15 months. At the hearing, Jonathan Hecht, former six-term representative for the 29th Middlesex, which includes large parts of Cambridge, explained the problem with the existing stipend system this way.
The current stipend system distorts representation and undermines equality. It empowers four people, the Senate President, the House Speaker, and the two minority party leaders, to make other legislators financially dependent on them.
We couldn't have said it better ourselves. And that's coming from someone who served for years on Beacon Hill. He knows what he's talking about.
In fact, there was a panel of several former reps at the hearing who all testified to similar opinions, talking about how the current system discourages any serious public legislative debate that goes against the views of leadership, and it's only gotten worse over the years.
So this stipend referendum tries to lessen leadership's patronage power by making stipends less subject to the arbitrary whims of Mariano and Spilka. But wait, Julie, is this type of patronage common in other state legislatures?
No, Max. The amount of dollars out there to reward committee chairs on Beacon Hill is way larger than in other states. As Mr. Hecht says,
this is not normal. There is no other legislature in the country with so many stipends, and where legislators are dependent on their chamber leaders for such a large part of their pay.
In fact, committee chairs on Beacon Hill get more than double the amount awarded to the next closest state legislator.
Again, in the words of Clay from West Balmer, shit. So stipend reform tries to functionally remedy this issue by, boop, increasing the amount rank and file committee members get, and decreasing the max amount leadership makes, changing the pay gap between leadership and backbencher from $120,000 to only $45,000. Viva la revolution!
It also sets pay so that only the members of committees that actually do work on 50 more bills per session get stipends, which means they conduct public hearings and markup sessions and report those bills out of committee. Importantly, it also allots stipend pay for non-chairs of the committees, so all those doing the work are paid for their efforts, not just the chairs.
That all sounds very good and sane for a true democratic legislature. That's why I'm sure Beacon Hill hates it.
That's right, Max. The Senate has already asked the state Supreme Court to rule against the referendum's constitutionality, something they didn't even have the guts to do for the audit referendum.
Yeah, I noticed during the hearing that legislators went after the referendum on all sorts of little technicalities. One of them, State Senator Ryan Fatman, yes, that's his real name, even had the guts to ask why the people didn't try to pass a constitutional amendment instead of putting it on the ballot. Boop.
Why not pursue this constitutionally as opposed to a ballot referendum?
The quick answer is a constitutional amendment has to pass through the legislature.
You'll notice Beacon Hill has no interest in addressing the real concerns that led to the referendum. That Beacon Hill is an opaque, corrupt hellhole where no one knows what goes on behind closed doors, and no one trusts them to pass good laws.
That's right, and more voters are showing discontent with their legislators. That's why a record number of questions, up to 11, are going to be on the ballot this year. The people are being forced to write legislation themselves on important matters that the experts on Beacon Hill either don't want to address or are incapable of addressing.
And this year, there's likely going to be another transparency-related question on the ballot that Mariano and Spilka will hate even more, subjecting both the legislature and the governor's office to a public records law. Finally.
Which the State House has yet to even hold a hearing on to date. Hold on to your hats. What's that about, viewers? Because this next few months are going to be a bumpy ride if you like transparency and accountability.
Shit. I love that stuff. Let's get it all out into the open. Let's not forget Beacon Hill reps work for us, not just their 4 leaders and their financial backers.
Until next week.
We'll see you first.
See you first.